Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Jones, and I'm a counselor with Care to Change. And today we'll be talking about the biological impact of COVID-19 and why it makes us feel so stressed from a biological model. So we're going to go through a couple of visual aids first to talk about the stress response, what that looks like in a normal situation, and how that has been impacted by COVID. And then after that, we're going to go through some suggestions on, oh, my video stopped right there. We're going to go through some suggestions on how to be able to use your stress response system or to manipulate parts of your stress response system so that you can begin to feel less stressed or get away from some of that problematic stress response that we're having during this time of COVID. So what we'll do is I'll go through this presentation and we'll save all questions until the end and go from there. I can get my PowerPoint working here. There we go. Okay. So first, I wanted to do an overview of the stress response system, and this is a natural system that's in every single human being. So we all have this system that's normally in us, and this is actually a system that's meant to protect us. So we'll walk through all of the pieces of this system and look at what each of them does and how they play a role in how we respond to stressors in our environment. And we'll first look at it from a normal perspective, and then we'll take a look at what COVID may have done in this time to influence the stress system. So we'll start in the upper left corner with the stressor. So some stressor happens in our life, that is quite frequent in our lives, that something causes us stress. And what will happen is there's actually two pathways that go through your brain as to how you're going to react to that stressor. One part of it is called your amygdala. You may have heard of this before. This is the tiny part in your limbic system in your brain that reacts to stress, that reacts to threats in our environment. It's actually based on fear, and it controls all of your sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your central nervous system that gets you prepared to get away from stressful things or threats in your environment. And this is a very natural system, and it is something that happens very quickly, and it's a very immediate response. In fact, that stress response that we have going from the stressor to our reaction to it is almost lightning fast. If you can think of times where, say, you were moving boxes in the garage and you lifted up a box and all of a sudden there was a large spider underneath that box. Sorry for those with arachnophobia. And the first thing that you notice yourself doing is immediately having a jerk reaction back, pulling your hand back from that box that you were lifting up as a very automatic and immediate reaction without any second thought of, why you're even doing it or what you needed to do to get away from that threat. Usually by the time that our brain catches up to realizing what it is well after the reaction has happened. So your amygdala is kind of that little piece in your brain that's super fast, super ready to get you to react and to act on things depending on what threats in the environment. So it's kind of that little box that says, let's get ready. Once we see a threat, let's prepare ourselves to get away from it in case we need to react really fast. Now, there's another part of our brain that reacts to stress in our environment as well. And this is called our orbitofrontal cortex, which is a really fancy way of saying it's the part of your brain that's right behind your eyeballs, which is what orbito comes from, is kind of the orbits of your eyes. That's the holes in your skull that your eyes sit in. Frontal, because it's in the front of your brain. And cortex is that outer wrinkly layer of your brain. And what this does is it actually analyzes stress in our environment to see whether it is actually a threat or not. So whereas your amygdala is kind of an all or nothing, is it a threat or is it not, very instinctual based thing, your orbital frontal cortex is actually something that is more distinguished. It's more rational. It actually processes that information to see if it's really a spider that was under that box, or maybe just like a dust bunny or a little clump of hair that looks like a spider but really isn't a threat to you. Now, what you'll notice about this system, if you look at that brown arrow, is that it is slower. It actually takes a lot longer for information to get up to your orbital frontal cortex to determine whether what you're experiencing is actually a threat or not. And then it gives feedback back to your amygdala to tell it whether, yes, this is a real threat and we should react to this, or no, this isn't actually something that we have to be worried about. And we can calm back down and get away from this stress response. The orbital frontal cortex also receives feedback from your body. So when your body is feeling keyed up or it has this stress response that we'll talk about in just a second, it can tell whether we are actually in a threat or not based on how our body is reacting to things. So, when our body has that jerk reaction from seeing the spider, that action itself gives feedback to your brain saying, we just had this jerk reaction. That's a reason that we should be afraid because we just had that motion. It continuously gives that feedback so that your cortex is going to be able to determine whether that was needed, whether it's an actual threat, and whether further action is needed to get away from that threat. So when we have a stressor in our environment and our amygdala picks up on that, it immediately starts triggering what's called the stress response, which is a natural response that our body has to threats in our environment. You guys may notice this when like with that spider example, or when other stressors happen in our life, you can see an increase in heart rate, heavy breathing, muscle tension. Some people experience shakiness in muscles, or really rigid muscles, really tense muscles, feeling keyed up or on edge. So constantly feeling like there's something to be worried about, or looking for threats in your environment, having hypervigilance. So searching for things, especially when you feel stressed already, you tend to be more keyed into things that could cause you stress. You tend to be looking for things that are going to cause you stress in your environment, and you're easily irritable or agitated. And that's just that natural reaction of, if you're around something that could be threatening or that could be stressful, then you're going to have that reaction to stress a lot stronger. So even things that are not necessarily stressors, or things that are mundane stressors, such as someone coming up and talking to you, or having to do a certain chore around the house, can make you more irritated or agitated just because your body's ready to resist extra stress that's thrown on it in that time. And again, you'll notice the brown arrow going from the stress response to the OFC that gives feedback to your cortex. So this is a constant cycle of systems that's going in, that your stress response is being activated by a stressor, yet your frontal cortex is still determining that entire time, is this really a threat? So depending on what your orbital frontal cortex keys into there, if it determines it is a threat and it allows you to have your natural stress response, eventually you'll hit a threshold, whether that is your body decides to act on that stressor, or your body's trying to decide what to do and finally just makes a move for it, where you will have a full stress response, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response. Many of you might have heard of this before. So this is when we either run away from things or fight through things, try and combat that stressor that's happening with us right now, or to actually like lock up and freeze and stay there until our body determines whether it needs to fight or flight. So you can think of this as like, say a good example is that this spider example. We'll just stick with that one. So let's say that you lift up the box, something looks like a spider, you have that jerk reaction to it, and your orbital frontal cortex determines, yes, this is a spider, so we need to be scared of this in this instance, or for those of you who do have fears of spiders, maybe terrified, and your body has to decide what to do. For many of us, our body would probably decide to run away, that flight response, because spiders aren't that fast. They can be really fast, but not as fast as a human can run away. So if we have the opportunity, our body's going to make that decision to get out of there. It's going to give energy to our muscles. It's going to increase our heart rate, increase our breathing, everything that we need to give our body energy to get away. Maybe to some of you, you hate spiders so much, but you have the ability to squish them whenever you see them. So maybe your bodily reaction is, I see a spider, I'm going to immediately step on it and squish it and get rid of it altogether. So your body will key up energy in your legs, or have that immediate knee-jerk reaction of, this is a spider, quickly kill it to get rid of it. Maybe you're someone who is kind of in between. You're not really sure. Maybe you're stuck in a position where you can't quite get away from it, but also you're not quite sure that you want to fight this spider because it's kind of a big, hairy spider. So your body may freeze and actually lock up until it decides whether it's easier to run away from it or it's easier to fight through it. In any instance in that, this is a natural response that our body has to stressors. And once you get through that fight, flight, or freeze response, your brain can begin to tell itself that the threat is gone. It lets your orbital frontal cortex know that there is no longer anything to be stressed about. The stressor is gone. We can begin to calm down. And as you'll see in that last box in the bottom left, that's when we get back to kind of our resting energy state. So we have a restful heartbeat and breathing. Our muscles begin to relax. The energy begins to drain out of our system. Cortisol that was shot into our system as a stress response that gave all that energy to our muscles is drained out of our system. We begin to feel more calm and relaxed. It's actually easier for us to focus or to pay attention on things because we're no longer hypervigilant looking for threats in our environment. And on top of that, we're no longer super irritable or agitated. And in that instance, we can also focus on our higher needs too. So when we have a stress response, our body's literally in survival mode. It's trying to figure out how we're going to live through this experience. So some of those higher needs, such as social interaction, maybe enjoying music or enjoying anything that's like a pleasurable experience, like a hobby or something, your professional aspirations, any of those higher order needs that we have are all put on the back burner when we have a stress response. But once that stress response comes down, once we're back to our normal rate, then we can get back into our normal rhythms of life. And this is just a continuous cycle that happens over and over again. This is a healthy thing for our body to have, this natural stress response. So that's the normal pattern of that. But what happens when we're in an environment such as COVID, where we're told that we have to stay home all the time? You know, maybe there's stressors at home that we can't get away from, or we can't fight through, or, you know, that impending information that we get fed on our news feeds all day long of, you know, how threatening is COVID? How likely am I to catch it? What precautions do I need to take to keep myself and my family safe? There's a lot of information that comes in on that, and it can take a toll on our stress response system and this natural cycle that normally happens. So as you'll see, there's a few differences in this flow chart. So the stressor is still the same. Let's say we're told to stay home because there's a COVID outbreak in our area, in our neighborhood or town, whatever. And maybe we know someone that we were around recently who got recently exposed, and maybe we're not able to get tested on it immediately. So this is a real threat that our body will perceive to us as this is something that is scary. Or maybe even not non-COVID related stuff, like there's stressors at home. Maybe the AC unit breaks on a really hot day, or any kind of other normal everyday stressors that we can usually get away from by you know, going to Starbucks and getting a coffee to kind of relieve ourselves from that, or being able to get away from, say, our kids that may be stressed from homework, so they're stressing us because of their stress that they're experiencing, whatever that may be. Our amygdalas are still going to be activated by that. They're still going to say there's a stressor in our environment and we need to have a stress response to this. Sometimes that stress response is less immediate than like a real threat in our environment, such as that spider example we used earlier. And sometimes it can be more long-term things, such as, you know, I have to work this week, but also I need to make sure I'm looking after my kids and making sure they're getting their homework done, or making sure that I'm completing other tasks around the house, or I'm making sure that I'm keeping my house clean and sanitized to try and reduce COVID exposure around my family. And that kind of stuff is still a stressor, and our amygdala still cues into that and will still get our bodies aroused and have that normal stress response. It may not be as immediate, and it may not be as psychologically arousing as an immediate threat in the environment, but that still weighs on us. We still get cortisol in our circulatory system. Our body still keys us up. It still makes us hypervigilant. Maybe not as much so, but in the longer run, it continues to build up in our system. Now, normally what would happen is if we're in an area where the threat is not actually a big threat, or we're able to talk ourselves out of it, then our orbital frontal cortex would be able to reason us out of it and help tell the amygdala, we don't need to react to this. We can get through this. But honestly, in these trying times, there's a lot of uncertainties, especially with us being forced into quarantine, being forced to be in an environment that we can't control about ourselves, not really knowing what tomorrow's going to hold, let alone next week, and having some of those real fears in our life. Now, because of that, our orbital frontal cortex doesn't really have a yes or no answer whether we should be concerned about that or not. And that makes it not be able to give feedback back to our amygdala to say, no, it's okay. We don't have to be worried about this. There is no threat. It's not really certain. So that activation continues to let the amygdala stay activated for longer amounts of time, continues to pump cortisol into our system. It continues to prepare us for a fight or flight response that's a natural response we're supposed to have with stressors. But we're stuck at home. We're not able to escape COVID all the time. You know, even though we're able to stay at home and to be socially distanced and to have that, there's still that small chance that people can catch it. There's still, you know, infections happening in communities. It's getting a lot better, but with that response, there's never a true escape. And on top of that, we can't really fight COVID. Like, there's no way to physically fight it. I mean, you can probably physically fight someone who's coming at you that you know has it and, you know, get them away. But as far as the infection itself, there's no way to really get away from it. Especially since it's all around us in our community. You know, some people have the ability to isolate themselves, but others still have to go out in the world. You still have to get groceries for your family. You still have to, you know, maybe you have elderly parents that you're looking after that you want to make sure they're not going to catch that. So we don't get that natural fight, flight, or freeze response that our body is preparing us for. We don't get that energy out of our body, and it just stays and continues to circulate. Or maybe if we do, maybe if the threatening situation is going to the store and getting groceries, but we're able to fight through that time to get the groceries we need, we take them home, we wipe them down, wash them off, whatever, then we're finally at a point where we're like, okay, now we can be calm from this. maybe we're still worried about some other things. Maybe there's other stressors in our environment with us having to stay home or with us having to change our routines that continues to tell our amygdala to activate our stress response system. At sometimes there might still be the ability for our orbital frontal cortex to deactivate our stress response system. So there is still that arrow that is going to that next step, that the threat is gone. We can still tell ourselves that that threat is gone, but only in certain circumstances when we are really assured of that. Especially with all the uncertainty going on, it's harder to tell our brains that no, we don't need to be scared of this right now. In some ways we can help ourselves to feel that, but there's just so much uncertainty that that connection between our frontal cortex and being able to calm our amygdala with certainty really doesn't happen. So we have less of an opportunity to get back to that resting state. There's not as much of an ease to return to baseline like we have been up until this point. So we tend to stay in that cycle in the upper right corner between the amygdala, the stress response, and the orbital frontal cortex, just because so many more of that stressor is coming in, and we're not able to break out of that cycle. So our bodies are continuing to activate the stress response within us, and we don't have any way to really escape that. And this system may be completely unaware to us. You know, when we have a stress response, a lot of times we're not super cued in that we're having it, because it usually happens so quickly and we're so able to get back to that the threat is gone response and getting back to our baseline that we don't really think about that until it's well over with. But in this instance, our amygdala is still activating us. We're still feeling all those physical symptoms. We're not really able to convince ourselves to calm down from that. Or maybe if we do, it's only for a little while. And we tend to stay in this activated state. And if you look at some of those lower symptoms on there, that irritability, that agitation, hypervigilance for stressful situations, that's just a concoction for us to experience more stressors in our life, to feel more stressed on things that maybe wouldn't have stressed us out as much, and have a bigger stress reaction to small things. So I want you all to take a look at this for just a second and think about, you know, what areas of your life do you feel where there's more of this weight of stress on you? Do you feel that heavier stress response that's weighing on you, that you're not able to really escape like you used to? And after thinking about that, we can move on to looking at some things to tell ourselves right now, to just remind ourselves that even though this isn't a trying time, we still have some control in this. And there are ways to break this cycle so that we can begin to feel more calm and less stressed in our life. So what do you need to focus on in this time? I've added some things that can be able to tell yourself, or maybe change these to fit your life a little bit more, but some self-validation or validation of your environment and the situation you're in, to just allow yourself to experience that this is a real stressor. My body is actually reacting to this, but even though this is something that I can't necessarily control, I can control my response to this. So looking at that first statement, there is a lot going on to make me feel stressed, especially because of COVID. Everyone's going through that. You're not alone in this situation, and I'm sure so many other people are feeling the weight of that stress. Maybe if you live with other people, whether that be, you know, your significant other or spouse or your kids, maybe they're all keyed up and stressed as well. And so there's a lot of stress flowing in your environment. And when one person is stressed in your home, oftentimes it weighs on other people. So that's going to continue to build that stress. But also, I'm hoping that you're not going to feel alone in this time, like you're the only one who's being stressed out by COVID. Because really, with this quarantine and all the stress that's been going around, many people, if not everyone, has had some kind of additional stress reaction to that. And that just weighs on our community as a whole. However, it's good to remind yourself that you're going to be stressed because that is a natural and okay reaction. Your body is trying to protect you. It's not something that is wrong to feel stressed or to feel overwhelmed with all of the events that are going on in your life right now. Your body is trying to use its natural system to protect itself. It's unfortunate that we're just in an environment that's not conducive to the natural system that's being used. But give your body that credit. If you're feeling really stressed and weighed down, that's your body trying to protect you. And it's a beautiful thing. And we have to learn how to help our body to be able to help ourselves so that we don't feel constantly stressed all the time and we have that outlet. So that third point, you may not be able to control the situation, but that's okay. If you're consistently hit with more stressors, if there are more things happening in your life and you feel overwhelmed, you got to allow yourself to give up some of that control and to understand you're just gonna feel stressed, because That is how your body is responding to that. And that's just the times we live in. But although you feel stressed, looking back at that last point, although you can't control your situation, you can control how you react to it. There are techniques that you can use to help your brain and to help your body to have less of a reaction to that stress and to be able to reverse and break down that cycle that we're stuck in, so that even though we may still feel stressed in this time and we're not going to get away from all those stressors, we can help ourselves take some of that weight off of us so that we don't have to feel so consistently or so heavily stressed all the time. So what are some things that we can do to help ourselves in this? Well, there's two broad categories that we can look at that I just mentioned as to what we can control with our stress response. There's one way to use your thoughts, which is that orbital frontal cortex, that part in the front of your brain that I was talking about. And there's another way to help with your limbic system. That's the system in your brain that's reacting to the stress that's controlled by your amygdala. When it comes to your thoughts, the first thing you're going to want to do is label and validate your stress. Tell yourself that you're feeling stressed. Allow your brain, allow the thoughts in your mind to acknowledge that you're feeling stressed, because we oftentimes don't notice that stress or try and ignore it or brush it off because we have so much on our list to do. But if we allow ourselves to acknowledge that we're feeling stressed, that lets our orbital frontal cortex have that awareness to say, yes, our amygdala is activated. We're having a stress response. We need to give feedback for that stress response to let us know whether we need to feel stressed or not. Bullet point number 2, ask yourself the question, do I need to react to this? Saying that question, especially saying it out loud to yourself, maybe in a 5-minute break you're going to give yourself while you're feeling super stressed, will bring some of that activation to your orbital frontal cortex. It'll activate it and allow it to give that feedback back to the amygdala to say, is this thing that I'm stressed about really something I should be stressed about? This is especially helpful for those little stressors that, since we are so irritable and agitated in this time, it can help us to control what to be stressed about and what not to be stressed about. If there's something that is really insignificant, but we're having a huge stress response to something that we wouldn't even consider stressful in our normal pre-COVID routine, we need to let our brain have that space to say, maybe this isn't something to be super stressed out over. Then when we're able to give that acknowledgement and allow our orbital frontal cortex to be activated, you give yourself that moment to process that question that you've just asked yourself. So allow your brain to have time to give itself feedback that, maybe this thing that I'm feeling stressed about, I don't need to be as stressed about, or I'm having a greater reaction than I think I need to have to be able to get through this stressor that's happening in my life. So being able to give that part of your brain time to give that feedback back to your amygdala. Keep in mind, when we looked at it earlier, your orbital frontal cortex, it reacts slower to stress than your amygdala does. So keep that in mind, that your body is going to get keyed up and is going to have that activation automatically, instinctually, and a lot faster. If you give your brain the time to catch up, it's going to be able to help calm that system, maybe not back to baseline, but to take some of that weight off of you. So those are some thoughts or some interventions you can use to help with your thinking. But how about with the body? Well, your body is consistently giving feedback. We looked at that line that connected the stress response to the orbital frontal cortex. Your body provides feedback to your brain that tells your amygdala whether it needs to stay activated, that tells your orbital frontal cortex whether it should let the amygdala stay activated. And it just gives all of that physical stress to our body, the strain that's on our muscles and on our lungs and on our heart. And we can use strategies to get away from that. So first, acknowledge how your body feels when it feels stressed. Do you feel tense? Do you feel exhausted? Do you feel irritable or agitated? Do you notice any sensations in your body when you're feeling that stress? And when you do, there's a few solutions to help get out of that. So we saw how that cycle was stuck in the circle and there was no way to break out of it. Well, one of the ways you can break out of it is give yourself an alternate fight or flight response. So use physical activity. Exercise is a great way to do that because it uses the energy that your body has stored up to be able to have that fight or flight response that it can't have. So going for a run, even though you're not escaping the threat of COVID entirely, it's still giving your body the opportunity to use that energy and to have the stress response it's storing up for. It's not a permanent solution, but having a regular exercise routine gives yourself that outlet so that that stress doesn't weigh on you so much and your body's not continuously queued up, and it can have that relief that you give it every now and then. But it doesn't have to be exercise. Any kind of physical movement will work because it's allowing the energy to get out of your body, and it's allowing your body to have a physical response to the stress you're experiencing. So stretching, doing yoga, going for a walk, taking a walk around the office, anything like that that allows your body to move and get your muscles stretched out is really good and helps with that stress response. Now, not only with the physical bodily sensations can we help, or the physical movement will help with stress, but you can also use different calming techniques. Now, calming techniques are more to address some of the other parts of your body that are super charged to be ready for the stress response. One of them is the deep breathing technique, the 4-square breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, any of those that instead of letting your body have a fight or flight response, it in turn goes to that stress response and allows it to calm down and stair steps it down, so that you can get that energy deactivated slowly. It's sort of like instead of opening up the side of the pool and letting all the water drain out, you're kind of pulling the plug and letting the water drain out slowly and trickle out. It's letting the water out still, but versus doing a physical activity, this is just letting it decharge at its own time. What's helpful about calming techniques is you can do them pretty much anywhere. There's a lot of calming techniques you can use, and they're very versatile, and they help you in the moment when maybe you can't go for a run or you can't get up and stretch. But they help reduce that stress response, and they give you that opportunity to take some of that weight off of you. And if you Google calming techniques, there's all kinds of them online, and all sorts of people have come up with different ones that you can do, say if you're at work or if you're at home, or ones you can do with your kids, ones you can, I bet you can find ones you can do with your dogs. There's all kinds of techniques out there to use in that. And then the other thing you can do for your body is to allow it to have a complete stress response cycle. So maybe there's something going on with this quarantine that's stressing you that you can't get away from, but maybe there's something else that is stressing you. Maybe there's another threat in your environment or something that your body is communicating to you as a threat that you can have a stress response to. Being able to use those opportunities to let your body have that response to it. Maybe I'm trying to think of a good example. But say you need to, say that there is, for an example, poison ivy in your backyard you need to get rid of. And it's something that is really irritating you and stressing you because maybe your kids or your pets are over there and you really don't want them to be exposed to that. But it's something that is causing you stress and causing you fear. And you know that you're going to be super stressed out doing it. But once you get rid of it, you're going to have that relief of it being gone, it no longer being a threat, it no longer causing you stress. So allowing yourself to face something that you're fearing, maybe you have bad news to deliver to someone. Maybe there's something really important you need to tell someone, or an email you have to draft up, or a big decision you have to make in your life that you're really afraid of. And when it comes to those things, use that to your advantage. If it's something that you just need to do and get it over with, but it makes you really afraid, allow yourself to feel that fear and to get keyed up from that, so that when you do get through it and you get to the other side of it, you can have that relaxation, the bottom part of that stress response cycle, getting back into those gray boxes and actually allowing yourself to have a stress response to something else helps you to calm down from the other things that are stressing you right now. It doesn't get you away from the stressor, and it doesn't help forever, but it does allow you to take some of that weight off your shoulders so that you're not feeling as stressed in this time. So hopefully you guys have been able to listen to some of these and are able to use some of these techniques in your life to help, again, not get rid of the stress altogether, but to take some of that weight off of your shoulders. Lastly, I just wanted to include some resources and some tips if you need help. If the stress is a little overwhelming or even unbearable, and you find yourself, no matter what you're doing, no matter how you're using these tactics, that stress is just too much to handle, and you really don't have any other way to get out of that. It's just weighing too much. Find a way to get help. Reach out to someone, talk to a friend or a relative or someone who's a good listener, someone who can understand you. Talk to a leader in your community, whether that be a faith leader, like a pastor or a rabbi or some other community leader, someone that you look up to, or someone that is really supportive of you that can hear you out. If you feel like you need additional resources, if there's something that is stressing you out too much because you need something, or you're thinking about seeing a professional, and you live in Hendricks County, you can use the Hendricks County Resource Guide to look through some of the options that are on there. It also has a search bar that if you're looking for any kind of specific counseling, or if you're looking for other resources, you can type it in or go to the different categories, and it can show you what's available in the county. And they keep keep it up to date. It's really good. And for those of you who may not speak English as a first language, there is a Spanish version available. If you want to, we're here for you as well at Care to Change. Reach out to us, talk to us. We'd be happy to hear what's been stressing you out lately, what's been working and maybe not working so well, and be able to see what kind of options are available, whether we can help you or someone that we know will be able to help you. So call our number or email us anytime. You can call our number during our normal daytime hours, but feel free to drop an email at any point, and we'll try to get back with you within a couple business days to see what options are available for you or how we can help. And if you are experiencing a crisis, if this is too much to bear and you need help right now, and it's not an emergency like a medical emergency situation, call or text the crisis line at 741-741. They're a 24-hour line that within minutes they'll get you connected with someone who can hear you out and see what you're going through and get you hooked up with the resources you need immediately right now. And if you're feeling like harming yourself or having thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore, call this National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's a 24-hour hotline that you can get connected to, and within minutes you'll be with someone who can help you to talk through what you're going through and help you to really figure out how you can get help right now. And again, those are resources that will be able to help you anytime, if this is happening late at night and you're not able to get a hold of someone at that time. So thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope I've been able to offer you something today. I hope that you have something to take away with you that can help you get through some of this stress and this heavy time, and especially as we continue to move forward with COVID and everything that's coming along with it. So I just want to remind everyone that we're all in this together. We here at Care to Change are here for you. Feel free to reach out to us, and feel free to come to any more of our presentations we have going on. So I hope that you have a great night, and thank you again for attending.